On the 13th of January 1979, American musician Donny Hathaway was found dead outside the Essex House Hotel in New York City. He had fallen to his death at the age of 33 from his room on the 15th floor with no indication of a disturbance or any damage to the open window. This was an artist with a long history of mental illness, having been diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic 8 years earlier. Friend and musician Glenn Watts noted on a 2008 episode of Unsung that he had become fascinated by white noise on the television. In a further interview on the same show, his wife Layla revealed that he thought their daughter and future soul singer Layla could see straight through him. The late James Ntume, the Juicy Fruit hitmaker who was working with Hathaway at the time of his passing, claimed that Hathaway said white people were after him, and he had abruptly left the studio that day at one point, becoming suddenly terrified and quoting Hathaway as crying that they had my brain hooked up to a machine and are stealing my thoughts and my sound. Despite timeless festive hits, prominent name checks in Amy Winehouse songs like Rehab, Dr. Dre samples on landmark G-Funk album The Chronic, and scorching Alicia Keys covers, Hathaway is not a household name. His premature demise may have had something to do with this lost legacy, but he undoubtedly left behind a treasure trove of music with 3 studio albums, 1 soundtrack album, a live album, a collaborative album, and some posthumous box sets, unearthing some buried tracks. There is a rich body of work out there by which we can examine this forgotten genius. On the week of the 45th anniversary of his passing, and with it being MLK Day earlier this week, it seems an appropriate time to explore 7 tracks that provide a glimpse into an often scandalously unheralded discography. Keep on walking tall, hold your head up high. This is Donny Hathaway's Slammin Seven.
The Slammin Seven.
Hey there, my name's Dan Whitell, and if you're just joining us, the Slammin Seven series takes an artist or a theme and gets down to the nitty and the gritty with 7 songs that I urge you to welcome into your ears with open ears. There are links to the Apple Music and Spotify playlists containing all 7 tracks in the description below. And if you like this video, check out the others in the series, and please strike that like, vibe with that subscribe, and swell that bell. And perhaps you'll consider joining our Patreon, where I'll answer all of your questions in a monthly Q&A video, or there's the option to just support us for £3 a month if you're feeling generous. There's a lot of music to talk about in 2024, and we want as many people as possible to join in with the conversation. Head to cacophonysessions.com for links to all our videos, playlists, and more. I started listening to Donny Hathaway about 11 or 12 years ago. I was familiar with a few songs as I'd spent my early 20s fully exploring funk and soul music. Shout out to my nan who got me this in 2013, Never My Love, the Anthology, which has been a really useful source in writing this video, as there really isn't a lot of material out there beyond the episode of Unsung and a recent documentary called Mr. Soul by Dutch filmmaker David Cliveegd, which I couldn't find. Scant documentation can be found for the career of a singer who now appears to be one of the forgotten pioneers of soul. There is less than half an hour of footage of him circulating on YouTube, and yet he remains the singer's singer, consistently held in high regard by people he'd worked with and the people who have since taken inspiration from him in the 45 years since his passing. The first song featured in tonight's chronological list is 1970's The Ghetto, co-written with Impressions lead singer Leroy Hudson and produced by Rick Powell, who was the drummer in the Rick Powell Trio, of which Donny was the singer in the late 60s. It ended up becoming his first major hit and featured on his debut album, Everything Is Everything from 1970. He had a few hits in the late 60s before this, but this was the first song to hit the Billboard Hot 100. The album version itself is fine, but the real heat is contained within the live version, recorded at the LA Troubadour in the summer of 1971. This ferocious funk stomper can be found on the 1972 album Live, which is one of the greatest live albums ever put out officially. It's the reason I can't help but scream, "Oh, the ruin!" in my head upon any conga player encounter that ensues in perpetuity. The track has a fantastic call and response battle between male and female voices from the raucous crowd. The live recording is what gives the track the extra propulsion. A 2003 interview between Mojo writer Charles Waring and live co-producer Arif Mardin quoted Mardin as saying, "Sonically, I decided to have the audience loud. It adds a lot of excitement." This certainly worked, as Hathaway works the crowd with minimal lyrics and just a well-oiled funk groove. with amazing percussion from the aforementioned Alder Ruin and a relentless groove from bassist Willie Weeks. Since the song is mostly an instrumental anyway, this 12-minute rendition really gives the track the opportunity to breathe. The other man who produced the live version was the legendary Jerry Wexler, who was a force at Atlantic Records. In 2003, he similarly praised his collaborator and agreed with Martin's assessment, adding, "Donny was at a genius level, like a Ray Charles or an Aretha Franklin, with whom he'd worked prominently." Not bad praise, coming from the man responsible for the decision to label the genre formerly known as race music as what we refer to it to this day, rhythm and blues. Without many words, Donny put critical ears on the sound of the ghetto, and throughout his work he would often combine elements of social consciousness intertwined with religious imagery, both a result of his upbringing in St. Louis, with his breakthrough as Donny Pitts, a name he got from his grandmother. He followed his first album with a non-album single at the end of 1970, which became perhaps his most commercially viable and enduring record within the context of pop culture. It was a Christmas song. This Christmas is the song that you haven't heard since last Christmas, which, depending on when you're watching this video, was either too recent and I've just triggered your post-festive season PTSD, or it's been long enough that you can withstand this entry and think, yeah, that was pretty good. Now available as a bonus track on his second self-titled album from 1971, this song was written with singer-songwriter Nadine McKinnon, with Donny writing that trademark seasonal horn riff. He also has fun with the time signatures on the song, as the song switches to 3/4 and then back to 4/4 at the end. This would be something of a trademark in his songs, demonstrating that he was much more than just a singer. It's one of the best Christmas songs ever made, and the intricacies of Hathaway's arrangement with all its jazz chords and expressive strings make it one that I always like to return to every year when Christmas songs are acceptable to listen to, which is December and December only. For those of you who play Christmas songs in November, I will fight you. I will lose, but I will fight you. Also from the 1971 second album, and another contender for the most acclaimed song of Hathaway's career, is the transcendent A Song for You. The third song on tonight's list is in fact a cover of the 1970 Leon Russell original, but for many, including Amy Winehouse, who herself covered the song, which was released on the posthumous Lioness set that was released at the end of 2011 after she died that summer. It was also name-checked by Prince in his 2009 song Here, and I would say this version's become a signature song of sorts. It was the first Donny Hathaway song I ever heard. His voice carries a sense of foreboding, which can be said similarly of the Karen Carpenter version. Both have these haunting voices that, in my mind at least, become impossible to listen to without their separately tragic fates pouring presciently into their respective timbres. The difference with Hathaway's version, though, is in part due to the arrangement by Arif Mardin, but especially in the way that Donny's quick fingers and delicate spiraling piano notes are playing ever attentively in time, but his voice of bared soul lumbers behind the beat, with the space in the record drawing out that contemplative, wound-licking performance. He really takes the time to absorb the essence of the words that he sings. Nothing is in more keeping with this approach than the line, "Listen to the melody, because my love's in there hiding," as his voice simmers in its own absence before weaving every line from a rich church fabric. Timeless, imposing, and wonderful, it is the deepest glimpse into a truly fractured mind and the primal yet deliberate expressions of an artisan in pain. A year later, Donny Hathaway's live performances from the time were captured on the exquisite live set, one of the highlights that would be sampled as recently as 2022 by Pusha T and Kanye for Dreaming of the Past. And it is itself a cover. Jealous Guy is dripping with the kind of naked soul of which John Lennon's original could only try and pastiche. When there's this much energy, the clarity by which Donny enunciates Lennon's lyrics and the natural textures of his range carry forth an authenticity despite borrowing the former Beatles words. There is a studio version, but this version, as with the Ghetto and similarly from a Troubadour show, is so very tight, with Cornell Dupree on guitar and Hathaway's perfectly controlled melismas and ad-libs, making this the ultimate version of the song. Cornell Dupree was himself no stranger to being in great bands, having played with Aretha Franklin, Joe Cocker, and the innovative King Curtis, who himself had helped Hathaway's career, along with the other big Curtis of the time, Curtis Mayfield. Donny Hathaway's peers were among some of the most talented and sadly missed black superstars of the era. After 1972's comeback Charleston Blues soundtrack, on which he was supervised by none other than Quincy Jones, Hathaway released his third and final studio album in 1973. Extension of a Man is considered by many, including yours truly, to be his masterwork. Song 5 in tonight's Slammin Seven is perhaps the jewel in the crown that his discography wears. The ethereal, socially conscious ballad that is Someday We'll All Be Free. From all its time signature trickery, again, towards the outro of the record, to quiet acoustic strumming, cosmic electric piano splashes, to a cutting melodic trumpet solo from Marvin Stam. But the true symbol of defiance present is that blistering voice that comforts us through the verses, but then scorches our very beings from an otherworldly domain and encourages us to sing your greatest song, and you'll keep going on at that pivotal moment in the song. It's a pity that Donny never lived to see any real progress on this social message, and that he never really saw any hope for himself within the song, or at least that he was not able to hold on to it when he needed to the most. As if it were recorded in a singularity, the lyrics of hope for freedom from oppression remains a pertinent message in 2024, and songs like this and A Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke, who didn't even live to see the 70s, remain lighthouses in the dark sea that is the fight for justice. After 1973, Hathaway's mental struggles worsened, and there were sadly to be no further albums. There were long periods of time where he functioned without his meds, and according to his wife Yulela, it broke the family apart. In the 2010s, a number of tracks recorded during this time surfaced across a couple of box sets, demonstrating that his musical talent never left him during this time. Recorded concertos, country songs, and the kind of soul numbers that we'd come to expect from him. My favourite of these unreleased recordings is actually the title track from the 2013 Never My Love compilation that I showed earlier. This song itself was released on a vinyl 45 as part of Record Store Day 2013, and is one of the earliest recordings from this collection, actually recorded not long after the release of Extension of a Man in 1973. It is another cover, this time by The Association from 1967, and Never My Love showcases Donny's thrilling piano playing, with more hushed tones in his voice matching the gentle arpeggios throughout the song. The fact that so many of Donny Hathaway's outstanding recordings are covers actually speaks to his unsurpassed ability to interpret other people's lyrics and derive his own personal meanings from the songs. Never My Love is not as bombastic or even as powerful as some of the other songs mentioned on tonight's list, but it's here to serve that even in his darkest moments when he was unable to continue with his career, he never lost that fire and the musical passion in his craft, and we can see that through beautiful curiosities such as this. Although his studio output dwindled, he was encouraged to record again commercially in his lifetime with his long-term collaborative partner, Roberta Flack. In 1972, they had released Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway, an album of duets, which included Carole King's You've Got a Friend and Where Is the Love, both of which are magnificent records. The Closer I Get to You followed as a duet in 1978, and it seemed that he was ready to work again. In 1979, Roberta Flack featuring Donny Hathaway was planned, and 2 tracks were recorded, the Stevie Wonder penned You Are My Heaven and the funky Back Together Again, which serves as the final and 7th track on tonight's list. The song is Donny Hathaway's first real foray into disco music, which had grown exponentially in popularity since his absence from the charts. Sharing co-lead vocals with Roberta Flack, the song features drums and keyboards from Stevie Wonder and backing vocals from Wonder, alongside Luther Vandross, Gwen Guthrie and Jocelyn Brown, who would all go on to have massive hits in the 80s. It was also co-written by James Matume, who, as I mentioned earlier, was there to observe Hathaway's behaviour in the recording studio at these sessions. His wife did state that Donny was not well enough to return to work, and following these sessions he had food with Roberta Flack and then retired to his room in the Essex House Hotel before being found dead the next morning with his cap still on his head. What actually happened that day is not known. Some speculate that he was singing out the window as he was wont to do, leaned out too far and fell, but there is documentation of his mental health issues and the descriptions of his behaviour from the time, and the fact that he just returned to the pressurised environment of making commercial music again suggests that there may have been some intent on his part. Regardless of the details, these sessions did yield the 2 songs that Roberta Flack would put on the album as planned. Back Together Again is one of music's great what-if moments. It's the funkiest thing he ever put to tape, with a growling disco bass line and post-disco synths shimmering all about the track. Yet despite its positive lyrical content and the message of hope within it, the up-tempo grooves and the familiarity and safety of recording with his long-time friend Roberta Flack, it may have actually been the act of recording this that pushed him to the limit. We lost a musical genius with unbound potential that cold January day. Roberta Flack herself said he could have been Mozart. She added that he was, quote, very insecure about how to make that available to the world, referring to his voice, which echoes musicians Phil Upchurch and Gene McDaniels, who both recalled over the years that he was not very happy in particular with his own vocal performances. Mental illness can manifest itself in very irrational means, and these 7 songs, I hope, certainly demonstrate just how much the world truly did love his voice and how much we lament what could have been. This was one of music's biggest voices, and he only had time to give us music for less than 1 decade. The help he might have received today could have helped him through those times, but we still don't even talk about mental illness as much as we need to. So whatever's going through your head in 2024, just know you're not alone, and make sure you seek help when you feel like you just can't go on anymore. In the UK, you can call the Samaritans on 0330 094 5717, or from the US you can call 116 123, or simply text shout to 85258. Please don't kick off 2024 suffering in silence. Elsewhere, or if you're not feeling like talking to someone, you can even just go to the Mind website. Mind.org.uk offer a variety of services and helplines for you. It leaves us in limbo. Had he received the support he crucially needed, it's impossible to say what he would have gone on to achieve. But instead, we can look back in awe at a true creative genius with so much passion in his voice that it can give you goosebumps nearly 50 years later. So let's celebrate that in every way that we can. Thank you for joining me on this ride. The Cacophony Sessions will be looking to make Slammin Seven videos once a month, so please subscribe to make sure you're alerted when they drop. We'll be back with the final Cacophony Sessions podcast episode at the end of this month, in which we'll be discussing all our top picks for Album of the Year 2023. After that, there's a number of new shows in the pipeline, and if you want to continue to support all that, as mentioned earlier, you can consider joining the Patreon, where you can pay £5 a month to participate in my monthly Q&A videos, or £3 a month if you just want to help us improve the channel. Let's make 2024 a safer year for all people suffering, and we can do that by making decisions to support politicians who will actually provide funding for our social nets, or simply through standing up for those who don't quite have a voice. Like Donny, I too believe that someday we'll all be through. But until that day, I've been Dan Whitell, and make sure you stay funky.